Well, hello everybody. Today is Friday, March 8th, 2019, and this is my summary of our accelerated growth class. As usual, the way we started is a round robin check-in, although I did make one administrative announcement, and that is that I probably will not do a spring accelerated growth intensive this year, mainly because there's a lot going on, and this will be our first intensive, and I want to make it really high quality, and I want to have 3 really good months, and so I may not do it this year until fall. But then I do plan to do 2 of them per year. And I think the other thing that I said to people, and I don't know if it matters to anyone that's listening to this recording, but I think that I've decided also that for the group program, going into an accelerated growth intensive may be the entry point. So we may be modifying the Aspire Group program in the future to be for those people who do want to work on ongoing accelerated growth, as opposed to just working on surface level stuff. So we'll see about that, but that was just the announcement I made. But then we did our check-in, and I just went through, we had about 7 or 8 people on the call, so I took notes at some point as people were checking in, and basically they were talking about how they were growing and what they were experiencing. And I'm not going to be able to do it justice, but I do want to talk about a few concepts just as I remember them. So people were talking about intensity and how other people perceive them as intense, and one of the concepts that came out of that is that typically when people give you feedback that you're quote unquote being very intense, what they're experiencing is the energy of your survival strategy as you try to make something happen in the world to get an unmet need met. And so when you experience intensity from others, often that's what you're getting from them too. They're trying to make something happen. They're trying to make you meet their need or make themselves get a need met. And so then we talked about vulnerability and how does that help? And so I'm going to get back to vulnerability in a minute, but actually no, I'm just going to go through each of these terms, I think, in order. So when vulnerability came up, it came up because one of our members is doing a lot of work listening to the Brené Brown books, and she writes a lot on vulnerability. As many of you know, she also has some great TED Talks on vulnerability. And when I heard about vulnerability, the way I ended up describing it at the end of the class is that vulnerability is the act of having the courage to not fall into your intense survival strategy when you start feeling a need unmet, and instead to trust that you can get the need met, to trust that you will get the need met, and to trust that you're surrounded by people that if you share what's going on with you, somehow they'll help you get your need met. That's really, really hard to do. And so we talked about how worry that you feel inside about not being able to get a need met tends to show up as intensity on the outside. And vulnerability is kind of an acceptance and allowing that need to come to you. And it's a very experiential thing. So when we run around the room, people were giving examples from their life about these various things happening. And we were able to give an example of a relationship when one person is coming on more strong to the other, and the person that's coming on strong is coming across as intense. So that person probably has an unmet need to be connected, to feel loved, to feel acceptance, and that's starting to come out as they're pursuing the relationship. And then the person on the other end is starting to feel a little panicky, and they may run the other way if it feels too intense for them, and they may put up a barrier. And what that often means is that the person who is trying to get their need met and use their survival strategy, sometimes it produces the exact opposite of what they need. So, for example, if you're a high achiever, and in order to feel good about yourself, you have to have an accomplishment, and you're working really hard to get A's, and that accomplishment is really what you're trying to do to make yourself feel worthy, the more and more you accomplish, the less worthy you feel, which seems like a paradox, but I think it may be true. So limitless is a word that somebody else used to describe kind of what they wanted. And we talked a lot about Enneagram numbers, and we talked about threes maybe showing up with more intensity because they're more really looking at that goal and trying to make something happen, whereas a 7 would look more for freedom and limitlessness and possibility. A 7 would be more enthralled with what we called the sunshine and rainbow at the end of a direct path for the 3, and for the 7, fireworks, with sparkles everywhere. And, you get to kind of choose your sparkles, but you don't have to eliminate any of them. You get to have all of the sparkles all over the sky, so that limitlessness. So it's not maybe a direct path, but you want to be free to choose any of those things. And abundance is really believing that it's out there. So abundance sort of ties into vulnerability because you can't allow yourself to be vulnerable if you don't actually believe that there is an abundance of what you need out there, because then you can't trust that whatever you need will be there. And these terms that I'm using are very difficult to understand unless you have personal experiences to back them up and couch them in, which we did on the call, not so much here as I'm giving you the summary of it. So you may need to call me or contact me if you have questions, and that's not a problem at all. Sitting with it, accepting, flow, receiving. We talked about, so one person's in a relationship, and the person that she's in the relationship with will profess love, and she'll freak out, and then she'll sit with it, and a couple days later she'll go, okay, yeah, I can give that back. And so she actually talked about that visceral experience of the initial reaction and the initial fear when she's got that coming to you. Now, the interesting thing about this person is for the past 2 years, they've really been wanting a loving relationship. So they've been pursuing a loving relationship, but this example was a great example for them to experience how they block that love when it comes so strong, and where we were even able to show how there was a really good reason for that person to be blocking the love, because when it comes too strong, it comes with strings attached and demands, and this person would feel, gosh, I need to respond to these demands, and then that takes away who I am. So there's a lot that you can learn from going through this accelerated growth program. But it's hard to learn just conceptually. You kind of have to learn it experientially with other people. So I want to just end by thanking everyone that was on the call today. It was an amazing conversation, and it couldn't have happened without you sharing your experiences and describing what it felt like to be in your shoes. I thought it was extremely powerful, and I want to continue to create this kind of environment for all of us who want to engage in this kind of growth, because it makes a huge positive difference.